Oi, what's happening? I'm Eddie, the Skinhead Gourmet. Today we're tackling one of the mother sauces, Espagnol or Demi-Glace. Oi. One of the keys to making our demi-glace is first we have to make a Glace de Viande, which is basically a dark veal stock. The base of that is going to be bones. If you have some veal bones, beef bones as well, you're going to want to take them, roast them for about 2 to 4 hours at about 300 degrees in the oven, keep them covered in water, and you can keep some of your mise en place veg in there to get some of the flavor out. It's going to be just like making a roast in the oven, but without worrying about the meat. You're going to release a lot of the flavor. After you're done roasting the bones, we're going to move on. Along with the bones and meat, we're going to be doing a mirepoix veg, as well as a few others to add some flavor to our stock. I've got some parsnips. I'm actually using one medium-sized parsnip, 2 white onions, a leek. We've got 2 tomatoes, 3 carrots, and 5 stalks of celery. We've got everything cut up, and I'm getting everything into a small Dutch oven right now with some butter. There's a little bit of bacon fat, rendered beef fat, and a little bit of duck fat in here. We're going to get this stuff a little bit cooked and release a lot of the flavors out of this as well. While we're cooking our mirepoix down a little bit, we're going to add what will be our bouquet garni as well, which will be some aromatic herbs that we're going to add that are going to end up flavoring the stock beautifully. In this we've got some parsley, thyme, sage, dillweed, as well as some garlic. And we're going to add this. There's also a little bit of fine diced rosemary in there. And I'm also going to add just a little bit over 1.5 tablespoons of black peppercorns. We're going to put those guys in there whole. We're not going to worry about grinding them or having them crushed up. What I have going right now in this one pot would actually be the basis for a wonderful vegetable stock. If you wanted to just continue from here, you could just add water, simmer, possibly add water a second time to concentrate everything down and then strain it. You would have a great vegetable stock. But we're going for something considerably heartier, richer, and more flavorful. And what we're going to be adding to our veg is we've got a good amount of roasted off veal bones. Now these bones I actually was allowed to bring home from work. We had already made a first wash demi-glace, so I'm going to be making a second wash demi, or what's called a remouillage, which one of the wonderful things with these veal bones is they're so flavorful you can actually make a stock a second time and get all the flavor and richness from them. You'll get a smaller amount. You have to reduce it a little bit more, but it's a wonderfully affordable way to go about it. To this pot I've also got other beef bones that I have, beef scraps, a little bit of beef fat, and as well as some stuff that I keep in my fridge with my scraps. There's always some carrot peels, some zucchini, more celery, stuff that may have been ready to go bad before I was going to use it, so we freeze it and we use it to make stocks throughout the year. If you have one available at home, a wonderful way to make this stock is if you have a big pasta pot. You can kind of put all your bones and veg in here, so when it is time to finally strain it, you can just pull this up, the liquid will pour out, and that way that'll give you a great first strain, and then we can use something like a cheesecloth, a chinois, or a china cap to get the rest out. This can do a lot of the heavy work for you. So you've had your veggies cooking in butter and some fat for a little bit. Everything's gotten soft. By now your kitchen should be smelling very wonderful. You should have strong smells already starting to come out. What you're going to want to do is get some cold water in here, and we're going to take this and we're going to transfer it to our larger stock pot, which I've actually had on high heat for a good deal of the time while this has been cooking, just to warm the pot and get a little bit of heat into the bones. I'm not going to pour everything off at once. I'm actually going to get some more water, fill this up just to make sure I get everything out of that pot. Right, we're going to have our second bit of water through here, and we're just going to want to make sure we get absolutely everything out of this pot. Since we are working with once used bones, we are going to have to work that a little bit harder to make sure we get all the flavor we can into the stock. And even if we were working with fresh, and this was the first wash for this, we'd still want to be doing this just because we want to build an incredible flavor. Now what we'll want to do is get this pretty much, we want water up to the point where everything's covered, and we're going to start with the waiting. We have everything in the pot covered in water. There's a little bit of room at the top just so I don't overflow it, but we're going to be adding water a few times to this during the process. We're going to keep this on anywhere from a low to a medium heat, and what we're going to actually want to do is reduce this down probably almost halfway, and then we're going to add a little bit more water, make sure everything's stirred up, and then let that reduce down to almost a third. This may be an overnight process if you start it later in the day. In a lot of restaurants, that's how it goes. You just want to keep an eye on the liquid level and make sure you're not going to be going for a bunch of hours when it's starting to get low. You can always put a little bit more in. It's just going to reduce out, and it may just concentrate the flavor a little bit more, which is what we're going for. So good morning. We've let our demi simmer at low overnight. We actually split it into two pots so we could add extra water because we're going to try to get as much out of these bones as possible. We let it sit on a slow simmer. Now that we're up and able to watch the pots, we're going to crank these guys up to high and get them to boil until we can recombine them, and we have this down to about 30% of what I'm looking at right now. Well, another few hours at a high boil, and if you can see through the steam, you can see we've reduced down what we've had quite a bit. So we're going to take our two pots, we're going to recombine them, and keep them on high heat for another hour or so. We've removed the pasta pot from the stock pot, and you can see what we're really working with. We've got a nice rich brown color. Although there's still some chunks in it, it'll need to be strained. This is what we're going for. We're going to want to actually reduce this just a little bit more. We're going to put the pasta pot back in, get a little bit more flavor, and get this down even further than it is. One thing that I've got going here now is after an hour of getting the two pots boiling, I recombined the two and actually added another 4 cups of water. Because what we want to do is really give all the stuff that's in this pot as much cook time as possible to get as much flavor as possible. Which kind of brings me to a point. If you're going to go through all the work to make a demi-glace at home, if you're going to buy your own bones, you're going to want to use this remouillage technique of making the second wash, if for no other reason, because of the expense involved, plus all the time and work you put into it. You want to make a lot. You definitely want to get something for your efforts. You know, you want to be able to have a bunch in your freezer so that you don't have to do this on a regular basis. This isn't like a weekly thing you want to be doing. You know, you can make this, if you make a good amount, and depending as to how much you use it, this could be a yearly thing maybe. So you want to get as much as possible out of this. But now after I've had this going, I've reduced it, I've added more water, I've got my second pot over here. I'm going to be taking small amounts out, putting it in here to reduce even quicker because it'll be less of it and it'll have more space. I'm going to reduce it, get it kind of thicker and darker, re-add it, stir, and then keep taking it out. This is going to just hurry it up along, since I want to move it a little bit quicker if you don't want to spend an entire second day on this. You know, this is definitely something you might want to do. It's a little bit more intensive. You have to watch it, you have to be stirring, you have to make sure nothing burns, but you can shave a few hours off of your reduction time. Well, I've reduced this down as much as I want, and I'm going to lift out the pasta pot, and I'm going to get all the liquid that's left in here out. You're going to want to get your spoon and kind of work through all the veggies, press down on them a little bit. If you're just pouring through a colander, it's much easier. You can just pour, let that catch everything, and then you can go from there. But we're going to take all of this, we're going to put this on a medium heat and let this continue to reduce just a little bit more on its own. It's getting a little bit thick, it's got a nice rich brown color. And while that's going, we're going to go through our pot, we're going to pick out the bones. I'll be saving these because I've got a dog who will absolutely love me for it. Otherwise, after you've gone through and made a second wash, you can pretty much discard these. They're not going to have much more use for you. We've gone through, we've picked the bones out, and now you've got a plate that looks like you came across an unsuspecting hiker. And I'm going to be saving these, cleaning them off a little bit, and saving them for my dog. But now if you're working either with a pasta pot or a colander, you're going to want to do all your picking through over a bowl or over another pot. Because you're going to notice, you're going to find a lot of moisture while you're going through here. You're going to squeeze some of it out inadvertently, picking the bones out. But what the next step we're going to do is we're going to take our big pot, we're going to pour off all the stock that we have sitting in the bottom. And we're going to put the pasta pot back in, because what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get in here and squeeze out all the moisture that's left, because that's a lot of flavor that we can still use in that stock. Now we don't want to get it lost in the garbage when we throw out everything that's left in the bottom of the pot. Well, at this point we've made a tremendous mess. We've gotten our Glace de Viande nice and reduced down. We've got it separated from all the solids. We squeezed out our mirepoix. We've transferred everything into either a bowl or another pot. We're going to take some cheesecloth, or if you have a chinois at home, this would be an excellent time to use it. But we're going to drape this over at least part of the pot. And try to get it as tight as possible. Now we're going to use this and pour the stock through here. This way we're going to keep any of the sediment that's slipped through the colander or the pasta strainer from getting into our sauce. As you can see, this isn't exactly a fast process. You have to be a little bit patient with it, but it'll be well worth it when you have a nice clean demi. Well, we've got our sauce strained, and we've probably made a tremendous mess. At least I know I have. So we're actually going to let our sauce sit for about 2 hours and cool, uncovered, and then I'm going to move it to the fridge for about another 2 hours. What we're going to do is let the fat all rise to the top, and it's going to make like a nice little orange cap that'll be easy to peel off, so we can remove that and then continue on from going from just having a Glace de Viande to having a nice Demi-Glace. If at some point you want to separate this and keep some stock and make some demi with more of it, you can keep them separate. You can always make a demi at a later time, but this will also be handy for soups and stews. You can make risotto with it. You can flavor a lot of things with beef stock, so it's not a bad thing to keep around. Here we are about almost 24 hours later. It's about almost 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We started this at 8 o'clock last night. We did the simmer, reduce, add water, repeat many times over. We strained it out. We squeezed out our mirepoix. We got basically the base, concentrated flavor of the stock. We cooled it for 2 hours out on a counter. We transferred it to the fridge. We cooled it down for another 2 hours and got it down to 40 degrees in that 4-hour window. We took a bunch of our stock and we poured it off into ice cube trays and other containers to freeze so we can make demi or other sauces at a later time. But I kept about 2 cups worth of the stock handy, and I've got that on a stove now. we're going to try to reduce that almost by half. At the same time, I've got a half a cup of flour in a pan at about medium heat, and I'm letting it get just a little brown. As you can see that it's just a little bit there now. And we're going to take this off. We just want to toast this because we're going to be making a special brown roux in the pan. And this is where our demi-glace is going to come from. So after we get the flour out of that pan, we're going to take one whole tomato. We're going to do it concassé style. If you remember from our earlier video about tomato concassé, you're going to want, when you go to cut this, you're going to want to cut it as small as possible. The reason we do it specifically concassé style and we want to cut it small is because we want this tomato to almost dissolve into the sauce as we make it. Along with our tomato, we're going to take 1/2 cup of butter. I've let this butter soften a little bit. And it does seem like an awful lot of butter for the amount of sauce we're using, but it is a 1/2 cup to a 1/2 cup with the flour and the roux. We're also going to cook this butter down just a little bit and make it brown. Well, we've got our stock reducing still. We're almost to the halfway point. We've got our butter starting to get a little bit on the brown side. You can see the tomato in there is very cooked. It's separated. You can see the solids rising to the surface and bubbling, and they're starting to cook down. We're going to turn the heat down on this a little bit, closer to low, and we're going to start slowly adding our flour. We're just going to want to kind of cover the top as much as we can. We don't want it to be too clumpy in there, and we're just going to want to start working it in. If your roux comes out looking a little on the soupier side, you can always add just a little extra flour to it, and we're going to want to keep it on a low-medium heat. And we can mix this in, and we're going to make sure everything's nicely mixed and fully incorporated. But when we make roux, you're going to, as we get it to where the consistency it needs to be, you're going to see that it's somewhat thick-ish. If you've ever made cookies, it's basically, it's flour and butter. So it should be about the consistency if you were getting ready to make cookie dough. But this is a regularly used thickening agent for many sauces, and the basis for numerous of the other mother sauces besides just demi-glace. So the consistency that we're going to want out of this is somewhat thick. It's going to be a little greasy while it's still warm. And I'm actually going to take this and almost separate it in half. I'm going to take half of it and put it aside to save for the next time I go to make some demi. I can just reheat this. And we're going to take some of this and we're going to let it cool for just a moment outside of the pan. We've got our stock reduced down to about where we want it. It's reduced by half since we started it from about 2 cups down to 1. We're going to take our roux. We're just going to get that right in there. And we're going to start mixing it up and getting that nice and incorporated in. We're also going to lower the heat down to maybe about a medium heat. Because now that we have the roux in there, we're not going to want to scorch the sauce. And with that flour, it'll be far more susceptible to that. And that's a great way to ruin a good demi. Well, basically that's demi-glace. After you've got your roux in, you're going to let it simmer for a short time. Once everything's at a nice consistency and it's been homogenized, you can turn off the heat, you can cool it and chill it, and it'll get a little bit gelatinous. You can cut it into little cubes so you have it ready for separate uses, and it's a wonderful thing to have around the house. It's integral in numerous recipes. It's a wonderful flavor enhancer, and it's easy enough to use once you have it made to just add to a dish. Enjoy. Thanks for watching. My name's Eddie, the Skinhead Gourmet.